أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So, one of the things that, as Sister Sarah mentioned, I've worked on couples counseling and gotten training in working in marriage and seen the profound effects that strain in marriage has on children and the upbringing of children. But what I also notice is the effect that upbringing has on adults when they are married and even before they're married. And so this, alhamdulillah, it gets me very excited to talk about parenting and rearing children, because really what we're then doing is looking at the community from its root, from the roots of where children are brought up, alhamdulillah. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about things that I've seen, things that I've read about in the literature on parenting, but also kind of combined with the issues that I see coming up within Muslim families when it comes to parenting. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this beneficial for all of us. I wanted to open up the floor for you guys to ask you, what do you notice as parents, uncles, teachers, people involved in the community? What kinds of issues are you seeing that are coming up now that maybe you didn't see 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or when you were growing up?
So I do have the mic if anyone wants to. Just raise your hand.
I mean, the issues within our community, within the society are really shifting. So what do you notice are some issues that are coming up? Yes? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. The internet? Mm-hmm.
Access to everything.
Access to everything. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a huge, potentially unrestricted access to everything that we see right now children have, right? I mean, children as young as, 8, 9, 10 years old have smartphones that, they take with them, and they're they have constant exposure, right? What else? Yes, sister.
I've seen where, children don't want. So I've seen where children don't want to, proudly say they're Muslim, and also they try to accommodate and say things to non-Muslims to make them feel like to downplay Islam. Because I was at a conference where it was like a dialogue between Muslims and non-Muslims, and I heard some teenagers telling the non-Muslims that it was okay to be gay. So I've seen Muslim kids, I've seen Muslim kids kind of want to be in that society and, be accepted. So they go as far as say, oh, no, Islam does accept being gay and stuff.
Right, so the level of acculturation combined with Islamophobia, combined with the natural adolescent inclination to want to fit in and be like the peers, that can definitely impact how children feel about Islam and how they portray Islam. Right, yeah, absolutely.
I see a lot of boys. In my daughter's school, there's a lot of gay parents, like 2 moms, confusing my daughter because her makeup is a lot of that now.
Yeah, and I mean, quite frankly, this is something we don't talk about much within the Muslim community, but it's something that in therapy with Muslim adolescent children, specifically girls, personally, I've had more girls, young adolescent girls in counseling from Muslim families, from practicing Muslim families who are questioning their sexual identity, whether they want to be a boy or a girl or a gender neutral person. They're questioning their sexuality, whether they're homosexual, heterosexual, or bisexual. These things are happening within the Muslim community, coming from conservative Muslim households. And I know that it's a little awkward to even talk about it within an Islamic institution, but we have to really open our eyes and recognize that these things are happening. If we close our eyes and put our heads in the sand, they're still going to happen. So we really have to develop the courage to address some of these things. I wrote an article not too long ago online, and it's online, about the topic of girls and sexuality. So feel free to look that up, because it is something that I see quite often in the counseling setting. So obviously these things that we've all mentioned, the issues of open internet access, social media, acculturating within a society that is now pushing children to think about things that were not questioned. When we were growing up, we didn't question, do I want to be a boy or a girl? We didn't question these things. It was a given that if you're a boy, you like girls. If you're a girl, you like boys. And there were people who fell on the outskirts, and that was like a thing that they kind of realized. Now children are being taught from the get-go that this is something you question, that this is something you think about. This is a part of your identity that you choose, right? And so these are all challenges for us as Muslims that we have to address. We have to say, okay, what do we do now? How do we raise children that are strong enough, have the courage to uphold their Islamic identity and the values that come with it while living within this society? Because we're here, right? We can't shelter our children forever either. That's not healthy either, right? And so, you know, one of the things that we have to recognize is that we look to the Quran and Sunnah for guidance, how we pray, how we fast, and all of these things. But one of the other things we have to recognize is that we have to start reading the seerah. We have to start looking at the life of the Prophet ﷺ and how he treated children, how he interacted with children, how he built children up right from when they were very young to when they were older and adolescents and young adults. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the Prophet ﷺ as rahmatul lil alameen, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ's example for us is a universal example. How he worked with children, how he interacted with them is something that we hold on to from the beginning, from the time that Islam came to now. It's still applicable to us. So we have to really make an effort to understand the seerah from the lens of children. There are publications out there, there are lectures out there to, talking about how the Prophet ﷺ, specifically how he interacted with children. So we have to really make an effort to educate ourselves about that and instill those characteristics within ourselves. The one that I mentioned is that of compassion and rahmah. Anas radiallahu anh, who spent a lot of time with the Prophet ﷺ as a child, he said, I never saw anyone who was more compassionate towards children than the Prophet ﷺ. So this was a characteristic that really, stood out about our beloved Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So let's talk a little bit about compassion, because that is instrumental in parenting. What is compassion? I have a list of things here that fall under compassion, right? Kindness, empathy, generosity, acceptance. So when we deal with children, when we have children, whether you're a parent, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an aunt or an uncle, right? We want to show children, we want to make sure that children know that we love them unconditionally. And truly, it is only the parent in a child's life, the adult in a child's life who can do that. That no matter what the child does, even when they mess up, even when they do something wrong, even when they have, throw a tantrum, that the parent is going to love them unconditionally. But at the same time, compassion also includes within it a level of accountability. So it's not like, okay, I love you, you can do whatever you want, but there is, I love you, but this is not okay. This is not how we behave, right? So it's setting boundaries, it's being responsive to the child, but in a way that allows the child to learn regulation, self-regulation, emotional regulation. What are the boundaries? What are the correct behaviors? This is something that nowadays is starting to really falter within parenting, right? We kind of go to extremes when we talk about, what's good parenting, right? Sometimes we see that some parenting techniques are very rigid. It's all about the rules, the do's and the don'ts. This is right, this is wrong, this is halal, this is haram, and that's it. On the other end, we have parenting that's too loose, right? That's just, okay, no, do what you want, it's okay. Oh no, my child is tired, so they hit other kids when they're tired. That's not acceptable, right? There's no, and it's kind of like a free-for-all situation. Both of these are going to have consequences, negative consequences on the upbringing, on the character of the child. And so what we really have to find is that healthy balance right in the middle, right? That's just right parenting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. And thus we have made you a balanced nation, a just nation, a nation of the middle, right? لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. So that you can be, am I saying that right? Yeah, right? Okay. So that you can be witnesses upon mankind, right? So the first level of responsibility of being witnesses falls within our own household, falls within our direct, immediate sphere of influence, and that is for parents upon their children. Right? But there's a middle path. There's a balanced path. Sometimes we see parents are so strict, kids don't know how the world works. Like I said earlier, we can't shelter children forever, right? But if there's too much rigidity in parenting, children don't learn how to regulate themselves. Then when the first opportunity that they get to go and experience the world, that's it, they're gone, because they never learned. They never were given enough freedom to test it out. They were never given enough freedom to learn how to fail and have the parental support to say, oh, you messed up here, let me show you, let me guide you. They never got that, right? And so that creates a problem. When it's too loose, again, research has shown that when parents don't regulate enough, children are just kind of given free rein. And we see that nowadays, and the perfect example that I can give you is with food, right? I mean, when we were younger, for those who are parents now, you know, when you were younger, you were given your mother made food, your parent or whoever made food, put it on the table, and you ate what you were given. Whether you liked it or not, that was time for dinner. You sat down and you ate. Now children are like, okay, so what do you want to eat? Do you want to eat this? Do you want to eat that? I'm seeing it more and more now where it's like, oh, my child just doesn't eat, so I just give them this because I know it's bad for them, but that's the only thing they'll eat, right? There's no expectation that, no, this is what's for dinner. Dessert comes after dinner, right? So these kinds of small things, we see, you know, the impact on children's health. We see the impact, you know, how rampant obesity has become amongst children, right? Diabetes, all of these things have become, you know, these are a direct result. They're directly interconnected with parenting style. When there's too much looseness, when there's not enough expectation, it's going to affect the children on many levels. Their emotional health, yes, but also their physical health. Right? And so we want to find ways to bring a balance where we can set expectation, where there are rules and guidelines, right? When there's love and compassion, but there are also expectations. Rules can be bent but never broken. Okay? And so this is something that we have to pay attention to. And this, when we talk about these different styles of parenting, if you're interested in learning more, I would encourage you to read up more on attachment theory. Right? I don't want to get into the technicalities of that, but that entire theoretical construct is on the parent-child relationship, and then also extends into adulthood, extends into the marital relationship, right? And so it's about the quality of the relationship. And that's really, really what I want to focus on today, more than the do's and the don'ts. And I'm going to give you practical steps and tips as we move on, but more than the do's and the don'ts, what I really want you to walk away with today is an acute urgency to work on the quality of the relationship with your children. That's really where the bread and butter of this is, right? You might do everything right, but if your child feels like you're a robot or you're treating them like a robot, it's not creating a relationship in which that's going to nurture love, that's going to nurture compassion. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about parenting. What's the goal? When we're talking about good parenting, having a good relationship, all of these things, what's the goal of parenting? What are we hoping for? Like when we say, okay, this person's a good parent, their children turned out great, what's the goal?
Raising healthy kids.
Raising healthy children. Let's expound on that a little bit. Healthy is it's a big word. So is this question, it's a big question.
Emotionally balanced, physically balanced.
Emotionally, physically, socially balanced. Okay, excellent. What else? What are some of the goals of parenting? Success. Okay, so I want to open that up a little bit as well. You were gonna...
Success both in the worldly matter, but being a Muslim, in the other, which is the Islamic matter, so the afterward and hereafter and everything.
So success in the dunya and the akhirah. Okay, yes?
Building the right pillars, and there are not the pillars in this time.
So tell me a little bit more about that. Building the correct pillars, a firm foundation. What do you mean by that?
Well, regardless of what happens, its challenges of economy, life, we're able to sustain it and not fall. Or not make the wrong decisions.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
will not be there all the time. If my kids go to college, I'm not going to be sitting right next to them.
Right.
If
Okay.
Pizza place, I'm not going to be sitting right next to them.
Excellent. Okay. So all of these answers, alhamdulillah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, right? Who doesn't want to raise healthy children who understand balance, right? Who can live a balanced life? I mean, this previous slide that I mentioned is balance, right? So balance starts where? With the adults in the life, right? So balance, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want children who are going to be successful? But I'm going to pose you with the follow-up question to that. Let's define success. Let's really talk about what is success, right? So there's success, and then there's this idea of really having a firm foundation, really developing the character within children where they can regulate themselves, where they can be moral and ethical human beings, moral and ethical Muslims, even when their parent is not standing there to watch over them, right? And so we have, one of the things that we have to remember is that parenting, like this brother is saying beautifully, that as time shifts, as parents become more distant from their children, they're going to have more responsibilities. And parenting it's a dance, it's an art where over time when children are little, then they're completely connected to the parents, right? And as they grow up slowly, they drift away, right? And not drift away and cut off. That's not healthy. Their primary source of support should still be the parents, but in a healthy relationship. But there's going to be more independence that's granted. There's going to be more autonomy that the children are going to get while the parents are still there to watch and guide and, correct and, fix whatever's going on if there's something does go wrong, right? So that is a beautiful way to look at it. Right? Because a lot of times, we get caught up in the humdrum of everyday, the routine of life. We have this idea our children should do this, maybe they should finish their hifz, and then they should have their high school degree, and then they should go to college and then get a job. So we have this notion of how life should progress, right? And our goals become more our goals become more tangible, right? Like this is stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, as opposed to more driven by character development. And so what all of you have mentioned actually has more to do with character development than being goal driven, which is excellent, alhamdulillah, right? So what are some of the challenges that we face in getting to these goals? Oops. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in getting to these goals of developing children who are healthy, balanced human beings? Yes, sister in the back.
The society we are living in.
The society that we're living in. What do you mean? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Like the exposure they have from outside is so different than what we have in our homes.
And so there's a dichotomy between what they're seeing outside, and I'm going to say what they even see sitting right in the home through the internet and social media, right? And what's kind of expected, the norms that are expected or that we've grown up with maybe, right? What else? Yes?
So there is less tendency for kids in this society and in this culture to listen to advice than our culture when we grew up.
Right. And that's a really, really key point, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. There's less of a tendency with that children will actually take advice and listen to adults within the current generation. Absolutely, yes. Yes, brother.
As a parents, our own lack of information and training, like how to raise kids.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm so glad you mentioned that, brother, because as we're talking about the evolving challenges, the challenges that are present now that weren't here 10 years ago, that is absolutely crucial. Because a lot of times what I see, the kids that I see, the adolescents, right, teenagers, young adults that I see coming into therapy, they're not bad kids. The problem is that their parents are raising them exactly how they were raised, thinking, well, I turned out fine. I don't know why my daughter is being so rebellious, right? But those same things don't work now. And so to recognize that I, as a parent, need to learn. I, as a parent, need to understand my child from the lens of my child, that's extremely crucial. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Jazakallah khair. Yes?
Defining what is right and what is wrong.
Defining what is right and what is wrong. Absolutely. Again, those definitions within the cultural context, the wider context of our society, are drastically changing. They are drastically shifting. So absolutely, defining what is right and what is wrong is crucial. That is, something we have to work towards. Yes?
I mean, also kind of over the period of time, some of the things which were not considered right or good become like, through the media and all that, all this sexuality and everything, it's kind of becoming like something people should be proud of, kind of. So it's like when they go out, they listen and all that, it's kind of very different feeling. Oh yeah, that's something great to be part of or something.
Right. So that falls into the first thing I have listed here, which is a culture of disrespect. This is one of the first things that someone mentioned, right? The larger society in which we live, it breeds actually now, more than ever in the past, entertainment, TV shows, social media, all of these things are breeding a culture of disrespect. And actually, I'd add on to what the brother mentioned, a culture of immodesty, a complete lack of haya. Right? Part of haya is to be respectful, right? To the adults, to our parents. But if TV shows now, common TV shows, right? They show children mouthing off to their parents. They show children saying shut up to their parents, right? When I walk around, even in...
Sorry to interrupt. There's a black Prius on P2 block double parked. I need it to be moved. Black Prius, anyone? No?
So now on TV shows and stuff, you see children who are mouthing off to their parents. Also, when I work with adolescents in counseling, I have to kind of watch my face when they say things like, "Oh, my mother, she's so stupid." Astaghfirullah, right? These are things. This is the same mother who I see coming in when she's in the room crying for the well-being of her daughter. Right? And you see these parents trying so hard, and the children are just blatantly disrespecting them. The children are blatantly, putting them down, right? And it's mind-boggling to me that the children cannot see how much their parent loves them. But that is the culture in which they are being raised. That somehow it is cool to just say what you want, do what you want, live how you want. Right? And this is a result, as I mentioned, of popular entertainment, including social media. And what this does, the culture of social media, it is now pushing children, young children from the ages of 9 or even less into their adolescent years while they're teenagers to develop closer bonds with with same age peers as opposed to their parents. So children are cutting off from their parents more quickly at an earlier age where they are developmentally not ready to be broken off from their parents and creating stronger bonds with same age peers. So now if I'm a 13-year-old girl and I'm annoyed by my mom and I go to my other 13-year-old friend, she's going to more likely than not be like, yeah, my mom does that too. Our moms are so annoying. Right? And then they're going to take a selfie together that they're going to filter and put up on Instagram because they want to get the likes and the validation from getting that, right? So they're not so the parents maybe are being too critical, maybe the parents aren't connecting, maybe they're trying, but what's happening now is that there's this pull into the validation, into the recognition from their peers, right? Social media also, it's addictive. Right? This, every time they put up a post and they get a like, it's a dopamine hit in the brain, right? And so now it's like an excitement that comes up every time they get a like on Instagram or on some whatever other social. The kids that I work with tell me about these social media sites that they're using, and I have no idea. Right? I try to keep up so that I can keep up with the kids I work with. I cannot keep up. So I don't even know how much of a challenge it is for parents who aren't exposed and don't hear about these social media sites, right? It really is a scary time. But this is something we have to be very, very aware of. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more about what parents and families need to do to counter this reality that children now, young children and adolescents, are becoming more attached to same age peers. Because what this is doing is it's causing their thought process is no longer being guided, right? One of the things that This author, I really highly recommend his books, Dr. Leonard Sachs. He's written this book, a few books. He's written Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, and The Collapse of Parenting, right? These 3 books, and he's written more as well, but they are phenomenal books. And one of the things that he talks about in Boys Adrift is challenges specific to boys. And in Girls on the Edge, he talks about challenges specific to girls. And in that book, Girls on the Edge, he talks about the benefit of girls being raised amongst multi-generations of women. So not just staying with girls their own age, but being around women of various ages. So if she's 12, she's also interacting with young women who are 19 or 20, or moms who are in their 30s, or other women in their 30s, and grandmas who are in their 40s and 50s. And the benefits, the psychological benefits that come for young women when they are constantly interacting with women in various generations, right? So they're making human connection. And what happens with social media, it's extremely, and for girls specifically, social media, for boys, video games, right? The damage that these 2 things do for young children, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. They are addictive in nature, and they are taking away from the richness that comes from human interaction for young children and adolescents, okay? And so social media, just one thing I want to just, for example, think about, when we were younger, we would hear about these celebrities, right? Movie stars who just kind of lost their mind. You'd be like, yeah, what do you expect? The paparazzi's always following them. They never get a free, private moment, right? And they lost their mind, right? They do something crazy and we're like, yep, lost our mind, right? Now think about it. Think about the fact that young girls now have to think, the moment they're stepping out of their house, how do I look? Do I look like I'd look okay if someone took a selfie and I was in the selfie and it went up on a social media site? They're constantly having to be photograph ready. They're constantly having to be prepared to be taken a picture of, because you never know who's going to snap a selfie or who's going to take a group picture. The camera is always there. And imagine the impact that this has on young girls when they always have to be camera ready. It is quite detrimental. This pressure that we thought only celebrities had once upon a time, our young children specifically, and more often than not girls, have this challenge following them all the time. What impact is this going to have on a young girl? At what point is she going to have time to stop and think about her own identity? Maybe she doesn't have a phone. Maybe her phone is put away, but her friends do. And she has to think, does my skin look good enough? Or, is my makeup done right? Right? There's no more of that, like I can walk out, with whatever in my pajamas and be okay. Who cares? No, because someone might take a picture. Right? The amount of pressure that this puts on girls, the psychological impact of this is, it's yet to be seen actually, because it's all so new and it's all developing so quickly. Right? And so the pressure of this falls on the parents. Like the brother said, we have to educate ourselves on the challenges that children are facing now. Because if we don't educate ourselves and we think that we can be blind to it and still raise children, you know what? Inshallah you can, but you're not helping your chances. Right? In the hadith, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, every one of you is a shepherd and responsible for his flock. The leader of a people is a guardian and is responsible for his subjects. And we talk about that again. This starts with our direct sphere of influence. Right? A man is a guardian of his family and he is responsible for them. And this, I'm talking about parenting, but I would be doing an injustice if I didn't specifically mention the importance of active fathers. I mean, just look over here. This is an example, right? Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless all of the men who are here. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you children who are the coolness of your eyes for every one of us. But look at the ratio of women to men just right here, right now. Women are more than double of men. And we have this notion that men, a lot of times culturally, that men are the breadwinners and that's it. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of fathers that are active and present, not just physically, but emotionally in the lives of their children. I tell you 100%, I cannot think of an exception In the cases that I have seen in the therapy room, some of the most damaged children, adolescents, and adults, I'm talking about people in their 30s and 40s who have come in for therapy. I cannot think of one in which the issue was not that the father was absent. The father went to work, provided a roof and clothing and food and shelter and all of those things, but was not present. I cannot think of one. That's kind of scary. So the involvement of fathers is crucial. And again, not just for disciplining and saying, no, you can't go out with your friends. Because a lot of times the father is a bad cop, right? Culturally. But for the father to be emotionally available for his children, it is not just it's not just like good, it's absolutely necessary. It is mandatory if you want to have healthy children. And boys and girls alike, by the way. Boys and girls alike. Right? So if you have sons and daughters, they need to be shown love. Right? We know the hadith of the man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he was surprised when he was kissing the children. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, what did he say? That I cannot make up for, make up for the fact that, you don't have mercy on your children. Right? That's not the exact hadith. Don't quote me on that. But, he basically told the man that this is not okay. Right? He was disapproving of the fact that this man said he had all of these children, he had never kissed them. Right? So showing affection to children is absolutely necessary while we incorporate boundaries and tell children what the limits are. So let's talk a little bit about what successful parent, and I asked you what the goal of parenting is, right? So one of the things that I want to point out that, you guys, alhamdulillah, you summarized it so well that I almost don't need to say it, but I will anyway, right? Studies have shown that success, and I'm talking about just worldly success, right? Success in terms of the dunya is a better predictor for success, better than IQ and intelligence, is self-control, right? A child that has self-control at a young age, even if their IQ is not as high as another child, is more likely to be successful than a child who has a higher IQ and less self-control, right? And so this is something, when we talk about the goals of parenting, when we talk about what are we trying to achieve when it comes to being a successful parent, it is developing good character within our children. It is teaching our children self-control. It is teaching our children about honesty. It is teaching our children about integrity. It is teaching them, letting them know what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, what are the boundaries that they have to abide by, and establishing consequences, all while showing them and making sure that you are showing them compassion and love. And letting them know that your love is unconditional. I love you and I want what's best for you. That's why you are not going to be allowed to have dessert tonight, because you're not eating the foods that are healthy for you. I understand that this is difficult for you, but we cannot go to this place because there's haram happening there. Right? So it's establishing boundaries. It is establishing the do's and the don'ts, teaching. And this cannot happen if children aren't talking to you. If your children are too busy on their phones with their phones stuck in their social media. This is not going to happen if they eat dinner and they walk into their room and they close their door and you don't know what they're doing on the computer in their room. It cannot happen if the children do not have a relationship with the parents, right? And so the job of, parents is to build the character of the child. Right? We talk a lot of times, and alhamdulillah, this crowd is, mashallah, you guys are ahead of the curve. I think you have these parenting classes quite often, so you're already, alhamdulillah, at an advantage with that, right? But successful parenting has to do with being more character-oriented. You guys have heard that, when children work hard and they, maybe get a good grade in school, or they academically, cognitively do well on something, rather than saying, oh, you're so smart, or you're so intelligent, that's not really a good compliment to give a child. You guys know about that? Right? You want to be more complimentary towards the effort, right? There's a study that was done where children were given a set of math problems and they were kind of like, okay, easy to do. Half of the children were told, oh, you're so smart. You got 100 on this. The other children, the other half were told, oh, wow, you guys worked really hard, didn't you? You put in a lot of effort to this, so you got 100, right? And so those are two sets of children. Then they gave them a harder set of examples to do. More difficult, more challenging work to do. The group that was told that they were smart gave up and couldn't finish it. Because in their mind, they were smart. And their smartness had a limit. If they were smart and they couldn't figure it out, that just meant they weren't smart enough for it. Right? The other group, whose effort and perseverance was praised, they worked hard. They didn't give up. And they continued until they completed it. Because they were given the message, your effort is what was worthy of praise. And so when they were faced with a challenge, they were more likely to put in more effort and to try and not give up, right? And so when it comes to, now here's a distinction though. Pay attention here. When it comes to cognitive achievement, you want to praise the effort. You want to praise the perseverance. However, when it comes to character building, when it comes to who we are as people, you don't want to say, oh, that was a very, compassionate thing you did. You want to praise the character because you want to build their identity. You are a very compassionate person, right? You want to give them the title of being honest. You want to give them, and this is again, research has been done, the difference between, saying cheating is bad versus you are not a cheater. Children who are told cheating is bad may still end up cheating. If they don't consider it cheating, they'll find a justification. But children who are told you are not a cheater, identity, are likely not to cheat, right? So when it comes to character building, you want to praise the characteristic itself, right? For example, and we have this, again, it's in our tradition, right? The Prophet ﷺ told us, what about the person who struggles to recite Quran? Double the reward. What's being emphasized here? The effort, right? They're getting reward for the recitation, but they're also getting reward for the effort. They're trying. They're persevering, even though it's a challenge, right? Verses throughout the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises, Wallahu yuhibbul muttaqeen, Wallahu yuhibbul muhsineen, right? وَلَا يُضِيعُ أَجْرَ الْعَامِلِينَ, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the characteristics. He praises the people of taqwa, the people of ihsan, the people who do good, the muhsineen, right? And so you see the difference even in the language within our tradition. Throughout the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, be muttaqi. Not half taqwa. Yes, half taqwa. But become a muttaqi. Right? Hudallil muttaqeen. The Quran is guidance for those who are people of taqwa. Right? So when it comes to building character, you really want to be praising the character, not the effort towards character, because that's going to build the identity of a child. And this addresses what the brother had said, right? Building that foundation, right? That you want to develop within a child that they are, or he is, or she is a compassionate person. You are such a compassionate person. You helped that child when they fell down. You are so generous. You shared your snack with someone else. You're very, for an adolescent, you are really responsible. I noticed how you helped, such and such person, or I noticed how you did this and this, right? And so you really want to be able to praise the character. Does that make sense? And so what I want to talk a little bit more about is this idea of character building, because this is what parenting comes down to, is building the character within a child, right? And so we know in Surah Al-Shams, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, Right? He takes the oath of many things, the sun and the moon, and it goes on up to number 7. He talks about the nafs. Right? By the nafs, and he who made it equal, who straightened it out. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. And within the nafs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the evil and piety. There are 2 paths. This is true for every single one of you, and for me, and for our children. And so parenting has to do with قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. We talked about success, right? What is one of the goals of parenting? To raise children who are successful. What is success? How has Allah defined it in this context? The successful one is the one who does tazkiyah. The one who is able to engage in self-reflection. The one who has a clear distinction between what is right and what is wrong. What is acceptable in the eyes of Allah and what is not. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Right? And this, the one who lets it go, the one who doesn't do tazkiyah has failed. Right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about the nafs. And what we have to remember is that success is not just a goal. It's not just having a good job. It's not just finishing tahfidh al-Quran. Right? So a lot of times we think, oh, success of the akhirah, okay, do hifz. Finish your Islamic studies. That's not all it is. Success has everything to do with character development. And when we look at the Islamic understanding, the composite, what the human being is made up of, from an Islamic lens, we see that the heart, the qalb, is right in the middle. It's a constant state of tazkiyah. We know that the Prophet ﷺ taught us a dua, right? Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Right? O turner of the hearts, make my heart firm on your deen. Why? Because the heart is something that constantly turns back and forth. Our children will go through stages in their life where they like Islam, where they're like questioning it, and the parent has to be there to guide them. The parent has to be there to provide a safe haven in which they can come and voice their concerns, voice their questions, voice their doubts. Another thing I see in therapy all the time with adolescents is that they are constantly surrounded by adults who don't want to answer their questions about Islam. Like, oh, haram, don't ask questions. This is a given. Right? The adults become scared when the children ask questions. No, the qalb is something that turns. This is a part of life. Every single one of us in here have had days where we say, Allah, what's going on? I don't understand, where our qalb is a little shaky. And days where we feel firm and strong, like nothing can shake our iman. That is part of being human. And what contributes to that are the 4 things you see around the heart. We know that the Prophet ﷺ also told us that there's a piece of flesh in the heart. And if it is straight, if it is sound, everything else will be sound. And if it is not, then everything else will not be sound. وَأَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبِ. And so this is the heart. And so the heart is influenced by all of these things around it. By our cognition, our thinking, by our emotions, by our nafs, and by our ruh. All of these things have to be trimmed and straightened and guided by parents in order for children to become upright individuals who become contributing members of society. And so when we talk about parenting and success in parenting, we have to broaden our perspective on what it means to be successful. Success is developing character within children, where they have a balance of the thinking. They might have the Quran memorized, but if their character does not reflect the Quran, then really what have we done? If they are able to finish their Islamic studies courses, but they have no control over their nafs, and they are hiding and doing sin because the recognition of Allah is not there, because we have not inculcated taqwa through our teaching, through our interactions, then what is the point really? And so we have to really broaden our lens on what is success and what is character development for children. Now, let's move on to, quickly inshallah, to some practical things that we can do. What can we do? We kind of have a theoretical framework of like, okay, just like, these like stages are not sufficient. What do we do to raise children that have integrity, that have taqwa? The first thing that we have to recognize is that it has to do with the relationship. the relationship between the parents and the children. If your children are not spending enough time with you, there's a problem there, right? We have to recognize that parenting and the requirements, that relationship that I'm talking about, is going to shift. It's going to adapt. Someone talked about adaptability. I think, brother, you might have mentioned it, that different stages in life, they're going to be faced with different challenges. Maybe they had an idea, they wanted to pursue a particular profession or get to a certain, goal, and they didn't. And the ability to adapt is really important to show children, right? Same thing is true of parents. Each one of you who has children, your children's temperament is different, and temperament will shift from child to child. What worked with one may not work with another. What worked for one parent may not work for you, right? And so that adaptability is important, and also adaptability within age ranges. What a child needs when they're 7-year-old, when they're a 7-year-old, is different than what he or she will need at the age of 9, then at the age of 13, then at the age of 17. Right? You're not going to be still feeding your child with a fork at the age of 9. That's going to be kind of awkward and developmentally inappropriate. Right? And so we have to think about the flexibility and the adaptability that we have to have as caregivers, as parents, as teachers, when we're working with children. The first thing we have to do for children is educate desire. What does that mean? Educate children on wanting, on being motivated to do more. We have to teach children virtue. And we do that by celebrating failure. Educating desire, the will to go on, the motivation to do more. The ability to face a hurdle and to continue despite it is desire. And this is done when we can teach our children to distinguish between pleasure and happiness. A lot of times children, again, coming back to the example that I'll give you, is that of food. And it can apply to anything. It's not just food. But, this is just what my child wants, so I can't help it, so I give it to them. With my nieces and my nephew, I have conversations with them all the time, about food and eating healthy. Most recently I gave them a challenge. I said, because our foods that we eat, the things that Allah has given us naturally, non-processed foods, right? Fruits and vegetables and the like. All the different colors that we have, each color has its own nutritional benefits and, benefits for our physical body, right? For our health. And so the challenge I gave them is every day I need you to eat at least one natural fruit or vegetable from every color of the rainbow. So skip the processed food, skip the candy, skip the junk, and that's your challenge, right? And you might not like it, but our taste buds change. We can adapt our taste buds to liking foods that we didn't like before, right? And so this is a challenge that I gave them, right? Probably a challenge that most of us here don't actually do either. So it's a challenge for all of us too. Right? But, but this teaches the difference between pleasure. Immediately, I liked it, I tasted it, and so I had it. When we kind of give in to every whim that our child has, and again, I'll come back to food, right? That, they just want to eat chicken nuggets and that's it. Well, really, what are you teaching your child? That what tastes good to you right here, right now is what's important, and I'll give in to that. As opposed to fulfillment. As opposed to building up character, as opposed to building up health, right? When I said, what is our goal for our children? Someone said health, balance, living a healthy, balanced life, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? This is part of it. We have to teach our children. It's part and parcel of our deen. The concept of the akhirah teaches us balance, that we're not just living for the dunya. We have to teach our children that if something is enjoyable to find, you want to play video games, that's fun, but there's a time limit. You get 30 minutes max and then it turns off, whether you're in the middle of a game or not, whether you're gaming friends from across the world or, cheering you on or not, that's the limit. Because we have to go to the masjid, because you're going to go play basketball with your friends. Because we have to sit down as a family and eat dinner, whatever the case may be. So distinguishing between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure does not equal happiness. constantly succumbing to what is pleasurable and immediately gratifying is going to lead to children that are self-centered and living a life that is just purely about them. Right? And so we have to educate desire. We have to teach children to live for something that is beyond just immediate and instant gratification. Something that's bigger than themselves.
So,
Yes?
sorry, how can you really get into them to teach them what you're saying? Like pleasure does not equal happiness. How can you convince them of that?
Well, it's not about convincing them. So I'm going to actually say it's our job as parents and working with children is not to convince the child, okay, listen, here, at some ages, maybe 17, 18, 19, yes, you're working with them on a more cognitive level. Here's why we do this. As children, if they're like 7 or 8 years old, this is a rule. This is what you have to follow. This is healthy for you. Mom said it, dad said it. This is what you have to do.
About teenagers?
Teenagers, again, it depends, right? But everything can't be about, I have to get my child to agree. Your child does not agree to getting a shot when they go to the doctor. When your child is sick, if you think about compassion, the image that comes to mind, right? I'm going to wrap up in just a few minutes, inshallah. Okay. When you think about compassion, the image I want you to think of, right, is a parent holding a sick child that's crying and giving the child medicine. The compassion is there, the love is there. The child doesn't want to take the medicine. What does a parent do? Takes a dropper, sticks the dropping tube down to the side of the cheek and puts the medicine in where they're going to swallow it. The child doesn't have a choice. The parent doesn't say, okay, beta, come on, just take your medicine. And they might be saying that, but the child is still pushing. They're still going to give the medicine, right? So it's, nowadays I see, a lot of times with young children, parents are saying, oh, do you want to eat this? Okay, if you eat this, then I'll give you that. No. You have to eat your vegetables. If you don't eat your vegetables, you're going to either go to sleep hungry, right? So this is another thing. I see a lot of parents come in and they're like, my child didn't eat dinner, and then at 11:30 they're like, I'm hungry. So in that case, let them go to sleep hungry for one night. That's a natural consequence of them not having done what you told them to do. They'll go to sleep hungry 1 night, 2 night, 3 night. And then they'll decide, oh, you know what, I better eat because I don't like to go to sleep hungry. Right? So educating desire at a later age, during adolescence, even then, it's a give and a take. So if I tell a teenage child, so one thing that I'm also very, that I encourage parents to do, and any teenager that hears me is going to hate me after this, but I really encourage parents to turn off the Wi-Fi. First of all, no child should have a phone or a computer in their bedroom. No adolescent should have a phone or a computer in their bedroom, right? The computer should be in a family area where the screen is completely visible to the parents, and no screens in the bedroom because you don't know what they're doing. There's no way to monitor that, or if there is, it's kind of difficult, right? But for an adolescent, if you tell them you're not allowed to take your phone in your bedroom, they want to take it. That's when all their friends are online, right? You might explain it to them and say, look, this is really not healthy. I just want to make sure everything is good. They're still going to argue against you. Right then and there, you are going against their nafs. I'm sorry, I get it. And that's where the parenting, that's where the love and the compassion comes in. Listen, I get it. I know you want to talk to all your friends, and I understand that, but this is not something that I can allow. You don't have to fight and have a shouting match, and I said so, and I'm the parent, and you better listen to me. That's not what you have to do, but you do have to put your foot down. That's educating desire. It is showing them. But also, let me say this, and this is going to come up a little bit later, but I'll say it now, is you cannot effectively do that if you yourself are doing the opposite. So if you've turned off the Wi-Fi and taken away the phone from your kids, and they walk into the living room and they see you sitting on your smartphone and texting away, that's going to be a little bit difficult for you to actually teach them that lesson, right? Teaching humility. So with educating desire, the bottom line is that children receive the message through the way that we interact with them, through the boundaries and expectations that we set, that personal fulfillment, getting what I want, nafsi, does not equal success. Okay? Teaching humility, this is directly correlated with social media. The opposite of that, of the self-centered, mindset that comes through social media is humility and gratitude, right? And so unrestricted access to social media and entertainment, video games, these things breed a culture of self-centeredness, if that's a word, right? Of being completely self-centered. The world revolves around me, right? And so it is a parent's responsibility to teach their child humility. Number one, by restricting access, as I mentioned, to internet and social media. Number two, creating expectations within the home, right? So having children do chores. It is your job to take out the garbage. It is your job to do the dishes. It is your job to mow the lawn. It is your job to feed the pet. Whatever the case is. It doesn't matter whether the kids are doing hifz or whether they're doing homework or whether they're involved in sports. You have to expect your child to contribute to the family. Because if you don't, the message it gives to children is that you are too good, or your homework or your whatever it is too important, and family doesn't matter. There are no expectations, right? So even if they're doing Islamic things, our Islam is not confined to the sajjada, to the musalla, and to the Quran. Yes, those are important, absolutely important parts of our deen. But the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before he became a prophet, he was known for his honesty and his integrity. So we have to build those things within our children. Our view of success Islamically has to broaden as well. And so expecting children to do chores, showing them that family comes first. Yes, I know that your friends are going out, but this is family time, and it's not, we can't compromise on that. We have to spend time together. Family time must come first. We have to teach that to our children. And again, we only do that if we are role models for them. So if we're able to cut back on busy schedules and say, no, this is the time that I have to spend with my family, then our children will see that. And then when we teach it to them, they'll say, oh yeah, this is something that my mom or my dad always emphasized, right? And so that brings me to the next most important, one of the important things that we have to do is create family time. One of the things that I see, again, in therapy constantly, whether it's the parents or whether it's the children, and I live in New York, so we have a very, very fast-paced life. So, I don't know if it's a New York thing. I'm assuming it's not. But, we have to create time to enjoy with our children. What I see all the time is parents that don't have enough time for their children, and they're just constantly thinking about, okay, I have to get them, showered and fed and bathed and, and in bed. And then I have to get them here for this class and there for that sport, and then take them to their friends. Where's the time that you're spending with your child where they can say, I had fun with mom or with dad? You must create time to enjoy with your child. Do things with your children. This is not optional. If and again, I hear it all the time, right? And some of you might be thinking, I don't have time. I'm sorry, but that's not an excuse. Your child's future is at stake. You have to make the time. You have to create the time for this. Because if you don't, your child, again, why would they want to spend time with you if when they're around you, all they hear is, oh, do this, do that, okay, you have to go here, you have to go there, mom is always yelling, dad is always yelling. Why are they going to want to spend time with you? Some of my fondest memories from my childhood are when I just sat on the couch and talked with my mom for hours. Or when my dad in the morning on the weekend would take us out and we'd go out for breakfast together. These are the things that make memories, fond memories for children when it comes to their parents. And if you don't make time for it, there won't be any time. We make time for what's important, right? And so creating designated times that are just for family. And if adolescent kids say, you know what, can I have my friends over? At that point, I would say there are going to be times where you say, actually, you know what, this is going to be just for our family. This time is just for our family. We can have your friends over another time. Family time is sacred. That's creating rituals around dinner. When you're sitting together, and I hope it's not if you're sitting together, when you sit together for a meal, for dinner, No screens at all. Parents, children's, TVs, iPads, computers, everything away. This is time for family. This is time for us to talk to each other. This should be ritualized within the family. Okay? And whatever other rituals that you create, but this is on the parents to create rituals where kids know this is time for family, it's non-negotiable. And that they can enjoy that time. It's not something that they're like dragging their feet towards. Once in a while they might, but that's okay. It's not your job to make your kids like you. You're not, they won't be your biggest fan when you lay down the law. And that's okay. It's your job to teach your child what's right and wrong. It is your job to teach your child self-control and sacrifice when necessary for the greater good. That's your job. So creating family time, and then on top of that, teaching meaning. Teach children that there is something bigger than themselves. This is one of when we talk about, the research on happiness. One of, there's a Dr. Martin Seligman. He did some research on happiness, what contributes to happiness, and one of the things he talks about is meaning, living for something bigger than ourselves. If I live for something that's bigger than me and I'm working, I hit a hurdle, I'm not going to collapse and fall apart. I'll get up and I'll try again because my aim is something bigger. It's not just about my personal success or failure. Right? And so we have to teach children that it's okay to take risks. We have to teach them to be willing to fail. And that is by celebrating their failures. When they mess up on something, we say, you know what, alhamdulillah, you tried and that's awesome. That was really brave of you. So what do you want to do next? Celebrate failure. Show children that it is okay to mess up. That teaches them humility. That teaches them growth. That teaches them wisdom. They learn from their experience. And they are then more open to trying new things. So teaching meaning allows children to learn how to handle disappointment and move on from loss. All of us know, wherever we are in life right now, that life does not turn out how we expected. We all know that. We've all learned that the hard way. Some of us have moved on more gracefully than others from whatever didn't work out. Some of us struggled a little bit more. If we want our children to learn how to move on from disappointment and loss, we have to teach them to be willing to fail. And they will learn to move on without the complete loss of enthusiasm. It is also, when they fail, it is also a natural way of learning that there are consequences in life. You do something, you mess up, for whatever reason, your fault or not your fault, but that's a consequence. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? And the last thing that I cannot emphasize enough, the most important thing with everything that I have here is dua. There were prophets whose children were not on the path of their fathers. The son of Nuh, the son of Lut, right? We have to make dua constantly because we are all human and hidayah is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah alone. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us this beautiful dua in the Quran. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all the leaders of the righteous. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the coolness of our eyes and our spouses and our children. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us, any of us who are struggling, to overcome our hurdles. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our families and our family life a means of success in this dunya and the akhirah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Menahal, for a really beneficial talk. Right now, for 15 minutes, we're going to have Q&A. So if anyone has questions, just raise your hand and I'll pass the mic, inshallah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So one of my main challenges is building trust. And, I know how kids have different stages in life, and there are some stages where it's not, I think the trust is both ways. Maybe your kid doesn't trust you enough to tell you something, and then they tend to lie about it or pretend and stuff like that. So how would you fix that?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So the idea of trust, right, and this kind of like mutual trust that's necessary, you know, a lot of times we have this notion that there should be a mutual trust between parents and children. Actually, that's a really good idea for marriage, and that's necessary, absolutely, in marriage, where there has to be two-way trust completely and unconditionally. But when it comes to children, your parents, you have to do your due diligence. Don't just take it for granted, because remember, when children want to make their parents happy, they might lie and say or do something, or cheat or whatever, do something that's not trustworthy to please the parents. And as a parent, you have to recognize that. You have to recognize, do your due diligence. If a teacher complains to you, or if you notice your child is being a little fishy, pay attention to it. Notice, and this is where that balance of compassion, but also putting your foot down, comes together. Teaching integrity comes into play over here. So, you know, you want to tell your child, listen, you know, I know that you lied, right? And I'd like to know why you lied, right? I know I would have been upset if you told me the truth, but really, you know, being a liar is not acceptable. Again, the characteristic, right? You're an honest person, and we have to make sure that you feel okay being honest. Tell me why you lied here. And having a conversation, it doesn't have to sound like that exactly, but, you know, letting your child know that you know what they did, letting them know that their character trait of honesty is more important, you know, that faltering from that is more important than faltering from whatever it is that they lied to you about, right? And having a conversation about it. A calm conversation, because remember, children, you know, in a healthy relationship, or even in unhealthy relationships even more so, all they want is the approval of the parent. So if a child thinks that getting 100 on a test or reciting their hifz sabak is going, you know, perfectly is going to make you happy and get your approval, they might cheat or lie to do that. And then you have to tell them, listen, we have to be honest. You know, it's okay if you don't do as well, but it is not okay to be a liar. And so, you know, when it comes to children, what's important for them to know, they have to trust that you will love them even when they mess up. For you as a parent or a caretaker or guardian, you don't have to trust your child, because they're not built, right? فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Every nafs has the inclination towards evil and towards good. It is your job as a parent to tame it towards good. So don't take it for granted, oh, my child would never lie to me. As a matter of fact, parents who say my child would never lie to me, their child is probably most likely going to be the one to lie to them. So don't take it for granted that you trust, oh, I trust you. Right? That's where the teaching comes in. That's where compassion and appropriate consequences come into play. You know what? You know, one thing that I used to be a teacher before I was a therapist, and in my second grade classroom, one of the choice phrases that we had was, you know, this was a choice. This was something you decided. So it's registering with the child that this is something that they did, that they had, you know, agency on, to tell the truth or to lie, right? So in this, I know you're honest, but this time you chose not to be honest about this. So we're going to have to cancel, you know, the trip to the toy store or whatever it is, right? So consequences are important, and you don't have to be yelling and shaking your finger in your child's face to do that. You can say it lovingly. You can hug them while you're telling them, because you still love them and you want them to know that you love them. But at the same time, they have to know that there are going to be consequences when they behave in that way. Yes. I think the mic, sorry.
I'm a psychiatrist, so I see all these cases, and we know that sometimes as a parents, we teach them to be a liar. Because
we teach them to be a liar.
To be a liar.
Interesting.
Willingly or unwillingly, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, my kids, we get invitation like 8 p.m. Birthday party or whatever party is there, and we usually go at 9. But on phone we say that, oh no, we are coming on 8. So kids are hearing everything. They are 1 year old, 80 years old, 60 years old, doesn't matter. And basically what we are teaching them is okay, you can, this is a no. So we have to correct first and then we have to teach them. Because otherwise we say to them things like that. For example, I have a patient, 18-year-old, he is alcoholic.
18-year-old alcoholic?
Alcoholic patient. So when I ask the history, and parents first they say no, we don't drink and all these things. Later on they start accusing each other that oh, he is alcoholic and she is alcoholic. So we have to be a role model. If we
Absolutely.
And this is just one example I am saying about the party time or things like that. Sometimes we get a call from different country, whatever, and we say, okay, just say them, Papa is not available. And I'm available. So that's.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I had it in my notes, but I skipped over it somehow. But the idea of being a role model is crucial. You know, I didn't get a chance to talk more about emotional intelligence and dealing with emotions. And I hope that, you know, inshallah, if you haven't already, that some of your future talks on parenting will talk more about emotional intelligence. Because again, just like self-control is a huge factor in predicting success, emotional intelligence is a factor in predicting success in relationships and life. And to teach children emotional success, we have to be role models. Whatever we do, our children see it. The way we behave. So just like I talked about social media, and you know, you've got me going now. Whew. This idea of being a role model and even attachment theory, right? We talk about, you know, so parents who are constantly now on their phones, which I see all the time, right? So parents would be like pushing a stroller and they're looking at their phone. Their child is there smiling and cooing, and the parent's like in their phone. That is really rupturing the brain development of the child, where there's connection being made, where the child, you know, development of emotion comes from the face-to-face contact with a parent, right? And so this is, the ramifications of this are huge, right? So talking about being, now I'm going to start rambling because this is a huge topic, right? So being a role model for your child comes with, number one, how we interact with people. Number two, it comes with how we deal with our own emotions. So if you yourself don't know how to deal with your emotions, if you're having constant outbursts of anger, if you feel like, oh, I can't let my child see me when I'm sad, what are you teaching your child? So you have to really think about that. And if you are struggling with that, then that's what therapy is for, right? So if you noticed, go back to the Khalil Center is an organization that, inshallah, is coming to Southern California, right? It's an organization that I work for in New York, at the branch in New York, and we do, we do psychotherapy that's grounded in Islamic principles. Right? And so if you're struggling with your own emotional regulation, if you're struggling with being a parent, there's nothing that says, there's no guidebook that's given to you at the birth of your first child that says, here's how to be a perfect parent. Right? You can seek help. There's no shame in that. And so, if you don't know how to do it for yourself, get help and learn for the sake of your children, if not for yourself. So, this idea of being a role model is absolutely crucial. And I really, I cannot emphasize it enough. And that is, just that topic is sufficient for an entire lecture on its own. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, brother. Jazakallah khair. You had a question?
Leonard Sachs as a resource. Do you have any other authors you would suggest reading or visual, audio?
So Leonard Sachs is a great resource. His books, he has a book called Gender Matters. Like I said, Boys Adrift, Girls on the Edge, The Collapse of Parenting. Great resource. Another good resource is Daniel Siegel. He wrote, he has a number of books. The one that I have is called Brainstorm, and that is navigating adolescence. So he talks a lot. I want to say he's a psychiatrist, or the whole brain child, right? Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's a neuropsychiatrist, but his work is phenomenal. He's really, really good. And so he talks about like the brain development during adolescence, and he talks about how the brain is kind of going through like reconstruction during adolescence. And so, the challenges that parents face with teenage children, how to navigate those. And so the books, they have tips for like the adolescent child, but also the parent. And so his work is phenomenal as well. Daniel Siegel. Dan Siegel.
The whole brainchild is for younger kids.
For younger kids, and Brainstorm is for adolescents.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's the newer one.
Yeah.
There was a question right here.
Yes.
In the beginning, you mentioned about the kids that you give therapy to, how like they turn on stupid. Are these children like within public school, or are they like in an Islamic school? Do you think the fact that kids are in a public school is more risky, or is kind of like the same behavior rather they're in an Islamic school and in a public school?
I think that the risks are there. The risks might be, the challenges might shift slightly, whether they're in public school or Islamic school. I used to teach at an Islamic school. I won't say which one and where, but I saw children come in like okay and come out totally corrupt in an Islamic school. And I've seen kids go to public school and be okay, and vice versa, right? So the challenges are there regardless of if your child is homeschooled, they go to private school, Islamic school, public school. Parenting is a challenge, and it is not a job that can be outsourced. So regardless of what modality of education you are giving your child, you are the parent. And it doesn't matter if you think that you're a good person, bad person, you struggle, you have your own struggles, or you don't, or whatever the case is. You have a responsibility given to you by Allah to be a parent to your child. So there's no such thing as outsourcing character development. There's no such thing as outsourcing integrity, teaching integrity. There's no such thing as outsourcing parenthood, right? That is your job. And you must be present and aware in your child's life to make sure that you're doing your job correctly. So, to answer your question, every modality has its own challenges, and you have to be aware of them. And you have to be willing to take them face on. Head on. Face them head on. There we go. Got it, finally.
Any last questions?
So, many times I notice that in our cultures, and many times we are kind of overprotective with our children. I mean, yes, we have challenges in the society where we are living and all those things, but at the same time, giving them enough freedom to learn and experience and, of course, make mistakes and learn from them. So that's kind of one. And sometimes I see, even in my family, that, okay, we want to have everything best for our children, but I mean, that leads us to sometimes being kind of overprotective. So can you talk briefly about that?
The struggle for balance is there at every stage of our life. What was the phrase? Restricted freedom. What was the phrase that we talked about last night? Controlled freedom. Yeah, controlled freedom, right? Someone that I respect tremendously, I was asking them, what did you do with your children? And this father's phrase now that he uses is controlled freedom, right? It's really a tango. And you know what? Here's the thing. That as you kind of learn how to give your child as they grow up, freedom, and again, through chores, do it through chores. Their responsibility, the chores that a 5-year-old can do are different than the chores that a 10-year-old can do. And that those are different than the chores that a 17-year-old can do, right? So you give them responsibility that shows them that they are accountable, but also at the same time, it changes, right? And what we have to, remember I talked a little bit about showing your child or celebrating failure for your child? The same is true for yourself. And I talked about compassion with your child, the same is true for yourself. You will mess up. There is no such thing as perfection. And that's okay. You will test something out and be like, whoa, that really didn't work. Let me scale it back. Or you know what, my child can handle a little bit more. Let me let them go a little bit more. Right? So this is something that you have, there is no black and white, right or wrong. So when you mess up, be willing to apologize to your child. And say, you know what, I messed up. I got really angry and I yelled at you, and I realized that I shouldn't have done that. Let's sit down and talk. Be willing to be kind to yourself. And if you mess up, to say, you know what, alhamdulillah, Allah gave me enough ability to recognize that I messed up. Right? So be willing to apologize to your children, be willing to adapt, adjust, and be kind towards yourself as you take on this, huge responsibility of parenthood. There is no black and white, but we constantly have to be aware of trying to achieve that balance in every domain of our life, not just parenting. Right? So I don't have like a clear answer for you, but that's, something that it's always going to be a work in progress for all of us. I think that's it, right? We're done with time?
We can go for a little longer if you'd like.
Oh, there's a question up there. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
I had a question about disciplining toddlers and teaching them between right and wrong, like right and wrong behavior.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So the question is, just about disciplining toddlers and teaching toddlers the difference between right and wrong. And this is where emotional intelligence comes into play. Again, another thing I'm going to have to discipline myself and try to keep it succinct, because it's, again, a huge topic. But this is, like we mentioned, the compassion has to be there. So we have to start recognizing emotion within ourselves and within our children. If we cannot recognize when we're sad, or we cannot verbalize it, we're not going to be able to do it for our children, right? So when it comes to disciplining toddlers, let's say a toddler, hit another child, right? That's not acceptable. Or a toddler hit an adult, right? Slapped you across the face because they were angry, right? First, I'd question, where did they learn that behavior? But maybe they just, got really frustrated. What you want to be able to say to the toddlers, separate, distinguish between the emotion and the action, right? In Islam, a lot of times we talk about hate the sin, not the sinner, right? Similar concept. So you want to be able to tell your child, you must have been really angry. Or, you got really upset were you feeling really sad when the other child took away your toy? Without asking, that wasn't nice. So that's what you did. That's how you felt, right? But you know what? We can't hit anyone. That's not okay. Even when we're angry, even when we're sad, that's not an okay reason to hit anybody. And because, that's what happened, you may have to sit down for 5 minutes and just calm down a little bit. Because when I get upset, when I get angry, I sit down for a few minutes. So the Prophet ﷺ taught us that if you're standing, sit down. That really helps me, not feel so sad anymore. We're not trying to get rid of the sadness. We're not trying to get rid of the anger, because Allah has placed those emotions within us for a reason. They serve a purpose. But we want to say that there are times and there are ways of expressing it that are appropriate and that are not appropriate. Right? And so you want to distinguish, have a conversation with the child, distinguish the emotion, what was felt, and the action that followed. And then say, when I get upset, sometimes if I drink water, that really helps me. Or if I get upset and I just tell the person that wasn't nice and I use my words, that's a much better way of handling it. Right? So you want to distinguish the emotion, the action, and then teach the child very overtly what is the appropriate way of handling it. Does that make sense? Okay.
I have a follow-up. So when we tell our children to verbalize their emotions, or if another child is hurting them, we tell them to communicate to the other child, please stop, I don't like that, that's not nice. But they're toddlers, so the communication really isn't clear, and the other child might not understand that, or they might not understand that. How do we help the understanding between children, like toddlers?
So that takes practice, right? And again, this is where being a role model. So the question is, how do we? Tell me if I summarize your question correctly. But how do we teach children how to recognize and verbalize their own emotions and express or like communicate their emotions to other children because they're so little, so that understanding is still developing? Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is one of the things where we have to teach children, right? So, if a child, let's say I'm going to continue with the same example, hit another child, right? And be like, were you feeling really sad? What does it feel like? So we want to practice this with children, right? What does it feel like for you when you're sad? Do you notice something? Sometimes tears want to come up. Does something happen in your chest, right? When we're anxious, we know our chest feels tight, right? When something's, when we're nervous or anxious, right? When we're angry, we might feel our face turning red. So what happened? Oh yeah, that happens to me when I feel angry too. So this takes practice. This is not something that's a one-shot deal, like, I taught it to them once and they got it. I mean, let me tell you, it takes me a lot of practice even when I try to teach adults these things, right? Because we've gotten so used to shutting down the difficult emotions, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, the anxiety, right? We want to shut all of these things down. But the whole point is to not do that, right? Brene Brown, she's a researcher, she talks about how when we shut down our negative emotions, that inadvertently shuts down our positive emotions also, right? And so we want to work with children on identifying those emotions in various contexts. So just labeling, maybe you're sad, maybe you're angry, right? What does that feel like when you're sad? So they become more in tune. And when they do, eventually they'll be able to say, I'm really sad right now, or I'm really angry right now. And if you've taught them, okay, when you're feeling angry, one way of dealing with it is to take a walk. One way of dealing with it is to drink some water. They'll start learning over time that that's the appropriate way of dealing with it, right? In terms of whether other children understand or not, we don't have, that's beyond our sphere of influence. So if other children, when they communicate with them, understand or not, that is not something that we can necessarily predict. But your child will eventually, if you do that, will learn to recognize and to label their own emotions. And so that's a starting place. Okay? So I think that inshallah we'll stop here.
Okay.
All right. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.